Hey everyone, it's now 7:15 p.m. on May 8th. Yes, it is May 8th, right? Yes, it is. And I'm going to do a little update on all the tadpoles we moved into the yard. It's now been probably 3 weeks or so since we did this. I just posted a couple short videos that are a little bit old, like the garden after 4 days. The garden has now been going in the house for probably close to 2 weeks since it's the 8th. I'll go show that to you guys in a minute. I just want to show you a quick video that I'm just uploading and posting immediately. I'll bring you guys in the house and show you that. So right here is what we got for the tadpoles. Now that the sun has kind of gone down, they're not as easy to see, but in the daytime, they're all clustered around the edge because they're trying to warm themselves up so they can start growing. So each of these pools probably has hundreds of them down there. You can see a bunch of them. And what's really cool is now that they left all the eggs, because they're clear, are somehow growing algae like crazy. So they have plenty of food in this little pond, which I think is awesome. And what else is awesome, this solar fountain, I paid 40 bucks for these, but now I realize Amazon now dropped it down to 25 bucks. Wish I bought them then, but I just bought another one for the pond in the woods. So this thing here runs well. I have one that survived the winter. I didn't even bring it in the house. It's still functioning perfect. Now this guy right here did not survive the winter, but it's not a big deal. I'm thinking I can fix it. This thing here, the only problem with it is, there's a little tadpole, you see it? Got up onto the panel. Look at that. Look at that little guy. They're so small, you gotta be careful with them. Yeah, this thing, the impeller gets stuck, but if I give it a knock, it starts moving. This has a battery backup, so it goes all night, and it has little LED lights. Look at this, the cattails are now growing from the bulbs. They're very stiff. They rooted themselves in real good. That's why we added a couple inches of dirt down there. Also good for the animals to burrow into. See, the grass is starting to grow. Even though it's been a couple weeks, grass didn't grow in too much because we are still very cold this far north. For the past 2 weeks, I can't say we've had a frost at all, except once. But tonight we are. It's going to dip down tonight to 28 degrees, which would kill anything. I have a few potted plants I bought at the store, and I got to bring them guys in tonight or they're going to freeze. We have 2 more nights of very cold weather, then we might be clear to start planting outdoors. Yeah, these are just a couple things I purchased at the store. This big strawberry plant, tomatoes, and marigolds. Those I'm going to put in a big pot right behind the house where I can check on them all the time. But they'll die if I don't bring them in tonight. Right here's the other pond. You see, even with this dim daylight, it's flowing just the same amount as it usually is. Sometimes you pick it up and you got to unclog. You see things get stuck in the filter. But down here, there's still a lot of tadpoles, if you can see them all down in there. All along the edge. That right there is a slime-covered rock I pulled out of the nearby stream and threw it in here. Oh, there's a water beetle in here too. Those cattails are starting to grow as it starts to get warmer. Leaves on the trees are finally starting up here. And I wanted to show you guys this. This is a little creek we have. I just removed a garbage-looking cinder block dam because when I bought this property, it was an abandoned house, and for like 2 years, the plumbing, nothing really worked. So I had a tiny little reservoir here where I pumped everything back to the house. Well, I put something more natural looking in instead of all the cinder blocks. That right there is just a bunch of rocks with a discharge pipe to quickly drain it. Now, this stream, it goes down to where it's barely dripping in the summertime, and this holds a nice little reservoir where frogs come and hang out. That's the only reason I left it and didn't remove it. I did a vote on my other channel, Post 10 Second channel, and people, the majority wanted me to save it. The options were to abandon it or completely remove it, so I completely removed it and rebuilt it more natural looking. This thing could be removed at a moment's notice, just to seal the edges a little bit. There's a tiny bit of concrete in the edge, but that whole thing could be just torn out in like 5 minutes. It's not held together very well. And thankfully, this right here, even though it's trickling a good amount at the moment because it's been wet out, in the summer, it just about comes to a halt. It's not considered a stream on the maps or the town maps. It's considered drainage to the town when I went to contact them, so No permits are required, although I don't think they would really care about this tiny little thing. Right over here is another frog pond that we have. I got that solar panel right there, which powers a little tiny pump under here, comes up here, and it trickles ever so slowly, but it's like a filter because we got moss. It's just starting to green up. Right there, all those leaves, that's just from last fall. I never cleaned it up because frogs actually really enjoy stuff like this. Very marshy, kind of dirty with slime. We got some cattails coming up. This pond also has a ton of tadpoles, most of which were actually put here naturally. I have to top off this pond. It's just starting to dry up a little bit because when you got the summer sun, all this right here helps it evaporate a little more. But I purposely made it so it can't completely dry up. Now, this right here, are those tadpoles that died, or is that maybe something else's egg? That egg sac always looked different. It might be spotted salamander. Is that possible? We had a lot of those earlier this year, but I guess the frogs got the wake-up call that we're getting some very cold weather. We haven't seen a frog out here in like a week, and all the frogs we rescued last year, they were all here in the spring. There was dozens and dozens, probably 100 at least around the big pond. They all vanished. Back over at the big pond, I hope the turkeys didn't eat the frogs, because I have been doing a lot of research on chickens, and they're similar. I've thought about getting chickens, but I also thought there was a frog that just popped down in there, one. Here's a whole bunch of eggs. You see, these tadpoles have not hatched yet. That's because this much larger pond is in the shade, doesn't heat up, the water's colder, so they're going to develop much slower. But this is a 6,000-gallon pond, and look at that, it's all turning green underneath on the liner. They're going to have plenty of food when they start hatching. You know, I thought about getting chickens, and I did a lot of research on them. Most people say you shouldn't leave them more than 3 or 4 days, but currently I work a week on, a week off, since I have an 8-hour commute to work. Usually just sleep in the car for the week when I'm doing that kind of stuff, and I don't think they could go that long. And it's not that I couldn't give them enough food. I would give them a watering system that's automatic, has like a float, like a toilet tank to make sure, or just leave the hose on trickling so it's constantly overflowing and replenishing. I've seen a lot of farmers do that. But the problem is bears. I feel like if I was gone a week, the other predators would know it. They wouldn't smell a human as strong, and they may come and they might start digging under whatever I might have. But I thought about making a big enclosure, basically a big shed, you know, studs, just no wall, and you put chicken wire around it with a bunch of rebar jammed so far in the ground so nothing can dig under it, because you want the chickens to be able to scratch at the dirt. You don't want a floor. That was my plan, but I think after a week something could dig underneath that. So here's another area. I did not put tadpoles in the shade, but if the tree frogs wanted, it was here. And if the tree frogs laid water around here, that's actually the water table. That's how high it is right next to this well. I would just pick them up and move them right here. I didn't want to put anything like tadpoles in the shade, only because I think that's kind of mean, like you just saw over in the big pool. That big pool, I did put a few in there. It's not that bad once it starts heating up in the summer. But also, the majority of them in that big pool were laid there by the actual frogs that we rescued last year. They reproduced in that pond this year themselves. So, I was thinking, yeah, I shouldn't be putting them out here in the woods. There's no sun, it's not going to grow as much algae, which they eat. Not as warm, they won't develop as fast, because I'm hoping they all develop into frogs so they can get out of there and hibernate before it freezes. Otherwise, they're all going to have to get dumped in the big pond for the winter. Because a tadpole can stay a tadpole for multiple years, but it cannot, it's not going to do very well if it freezes solid, because it can't go underground into a suspended state like a frog, because it's more like a fish. So this is an area of the yard right now. We had a gigantic blowdown here back before I owned the property. You see it grew in pretty dense. But we have another area that recently blew down. I'm taking a walk with you guys to the other frog pond, which I also did not put anything in. It was just there for the tree frogs. It's taking a walk down the trail. We have this trail along the property in the neighbor's yard over here. The neighbor's a nice guy. He has like probably a 500,000 gallon pond. It's huge. He got a permit maybe, I don't know how long ago it was. He had to have had it for years, since you can see it from the satellite. But his pond, he actually got permission from the town to dam a pretty big river to build his pond, and it just overflows. But I think the reason he really got permission for his pond is because he said when he went to town with the proposal, because we're in the country and we don't have city water, he wanted it for dry fire hydrants. The stream is replenishing that giant pond, but it also has a fill station for tanker trucks to be able to fight his house, and they could also use it for neighboring houses like me. So on this section of trail, you see I got it passable, but I honestly just kind of gave up. We had probably a couple dozen trees fall over. At least 56 trees so far. I've only cut up maybe not even 30 of them. I just kind of gave up for the time being. It's just so much. I just didn't want so much debris if there was a forest fire, but look how dry this is. A forest fire could still rip through here, which was the concern. See how the ground is all scratched and stuff? While planting grass seed, I put corn on every trail because we have wild turkeys everywhere. That occupied them away from the grass seed for a while, but then they ate all the corn and they went after the seed too. So this was a whole bunch of trees. This was a blowdown. This whole area just had so many trees fall over and we had to clean them up. We can burn this for heating in the house. Because this is very sappy evergreen, it's going to sit out here for 2 years this season. Not even going to haul it back to the house for a long time. And hopefully seedlings start growing in. There's already a bunch of little seedlings, hoping they all grow in. I'll give it maybe another month and we'll check that camera. See whatever came by for the corn I spread around. And now that there's nothing, whatever animal just passes, because animals, of course, are going to use my trails. It's the easiest way to walk through the woods. So here we have the trail camera right there for whatever goes across this bridge. It is now officially dried up in the spring thaw. This is always a big pool of water. Frogs sometimes accidentally lay their eggs there, not knowing it disappears like it obviously did. And they didn't lay any eggs this year, but I would have moved them into this pool. This just stopped flowing a couple days ago. Put some clumps of grass here because the turkeys destroyed the hill trying to get the grass seed. But the grass is finally starting to sprout. It's behind because there's a good amount of it. Because we're in the middle of the forest, it's not as warm. You see the cattail bulb barely started growing compared to the others you saw. It's kind of murky in here. The only thing I see living in here is a few mosquito larvae. I mentioned in my video of building these, mosquitoes usually aren't a problem in the country because you get water skimmers. Well, water skimmers love sunshine. They're not going to come here in the woods. But after seeing how efficient those fountains are, being able to operate in this dim light, I bought a fountain for this. It'll drive them things crazy. And it has a little battery backup, which is awesome. As soon as that shows up in the mail, it should show up tomorrow. I'm going to put that one out here. That'll scare all the mosquitoes away. Because this isn't something I can keep dumping out. Like, you saw the one over by the well, that little tiny pool of water, or I should say the tray of water. Whenever I see mosquito larvae in there, good. Let them live in there. I'll just keep dumping them out every couple days. Rather them lay their eggs there where I can kill them than just go somewhere else, in my opinion. So if you guys saw way back there where I was showing you the blowdown, we had a couple piles of debris. We call those a habitat pile, so you don't have to burn it. A habitat pile slowly rots, and it allows the nutrients to go back into the ground, and it also allows animals to live in the pile. You don't want to do that if you live in a city, because things that are invasive, like rats and mice, will live in there. But rats are not native. They will not show up here by themselves in the middle of the woods. They just won't. This was the burn site from the winter. Back in the winter, we just started burning it all until I had a tree company friend come out and help me with all that blowdown. Because you see, like, this one's stuck. We gave this one that's stuck up here a chance because it only had a small crack, but it just came down the rest of the way. We still have a bunch of them that are still stuck that we'll deal with at some point. But, like, this tree, that's going to die, this big white pine. Yeah, this was our little burn site, and now that it's, there's no trees here anymore. I was thinking about, why don't I just throw a couple tomato plants or something in the middle of this? They'll do well. But also, this whole area, I thought that planting grass may actually help, hold moisture, rot everything faster. It might be beneficial. So I bought like $150 worth of grass seed, threw it absolutely everywhere 2 weeks ago. Turkeys came through, they roughened up the whole area. I don't think they ate it all. I think we'll still get something, but I'm sure they ate the majority of it. But right here, I planted a bunch of grass seed here too in the burn pit 2 years ago, since I'm not going to use this spot again. 2 weeks ago. Looking around, do we see any grass seed up close? Oh, yes, we do. Look at it all. Yep, the turkeys didn't even make a dent. Look at that. There's a good layer of it everywhere. We're just in the woods where it hasn't got a chance to really take off as much as we would like. So that's good. This whole area will be nice and green by summer. The whole forest floor. Perfect. Right here, we have a bunch of trees stuck. You see them all back here. So, because of all the drought and invasive bugs, mainly the emerald ash borer, what it does is it eats between the bark and the wood, basically girdling the tree, and it just kills them. That's why all the pine trees look like garbage. We've had 3 years of severe drought here, and during drought, trees don't produce sap as much, which protects them from bugs. So the bugs took off, and I remember when I was a kid, northern New England's forests were so dense. I have a photo album they left in the abandoned house when I bought this place. It showed pictures of this property from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. It was always beautiful and dense. But recently with droughts and bugs, it's not dense anymore. When I bought this place 3 years ago, you couldn't see the outline of cars' headlights going through the forest on the highway nearby that you can obviously hear. Now you can. The forest is slowly getting less and less dense every single year because of that. And I'm thinking that the pine trees are just going to die out. They're the weakest trees as far as taking high temperature swings. They're the worst with dealing with droughts. They're the worst with dealing with bugs. Bugs target them fastest because they're soft wood. They just go after them like crazy. So I'm starting to see a change just 3 years. And I think, honestly, in the coming decades, pine trees will be replaced by things that can handle the bugs and droughts much better. I'm already seeing it happen. I don't know if these little tiny pine trees, they're doing pretty well, but I don't know if they're going to get the chance to grow as big as these. This property used to be part of the logging forest. Every tree you see on this property is planted 1972 or so. And yeah, every tree on this property was planted between 1972 and 1978. The building was built in 1978, but I know the logging company was logging it in 1972. And between there and when the house was built is when they did all that. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but behind me is a gigantic clearing. Logging company still owns that. And they logged it by the growth, I would say. Couldn't have been more than 10 years ago. There's a lot of small stuff growing up back there, which is, yeah. At least the logging company owns behind me. I'm really happy about that because it's very hard to get them to sell you property. It costs a fortune, and I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. They want to hold on to their land. All right, everyone, so we're back in the house. This was all planted, I believe, on April 26th. See right here, Boston cucumbers. Some of them are coming up really good. It must be the seeds that were more shallow, but you can see bulges where more are about to start coming up. These right here are peas. None of the peas in the dirt actually came up, but the couple I spilled really came up and they rooted into here. When I plant them outside in maybe a week or two, I will just try to separate them and, yeah, try to make them into their own plant. Zucchini's coming up. No, that's zinnia. Zinnia's coming up. Really good. Asparagus. Doesn't look like anything yet. People said those things can take up to a month to germinate. And I'm going to take the farmer's advice who said in my last comment to put them in a pot that I can bring in the house because they won't survive the winter probably the first year until they're established. 0 of the bell peppers, which are those 2 strips. I don't know how to pronounce that, Marrow Globe tomatoes. They all came up like crazy. What's this? Oh, that's a different kind of cucumber. Only a couple came up. Beef tomato, a bunch came up. A good amount of cherry tomatoes came up. The chili pepper and the cayenne pepper and the Hungarian pepper. Little or nothing. That one looks like it's about to sprout, but we are going to have a few more deep freezes in the next day or two, so it's a good thing they're in here. The timer has already shut this grow lamp off, which I got. So, yeah, just giving a little update on the plant. We'll probably put these out in maybe 2 more weeks or so. They should be ready enough. Thanks for watching, everybody, and have a great night.